The smell of vanilla candles couldn't mask the bitter taste of betrayal that lingered in my mouth as I stared at the pregnancy test box hidden beneath Sophia's silk scarves. 2 tests missing. 2 fucking tests from a woman who'd been on birth control for 3 years and had made it crystal clear she never wanted children. At least not with me. My hands trembled as I held the empty package, the afternoon sunlight streaming through our bedroom window casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, David Chen, the man who'd built a tech empire worth hundreds of millions, reduced to rifling through my fiancé's drawers like some paranoid husband in a bad thriller. But I wasn't paranoid. I was thorough. And what I'd discovered in the past week would have broken a lesser man. The first clue had been innocuous enough. Sophia coming home late from yoga class with her hair smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Then there were the hushed phone calls, the sudden interest in weekend business trips, and the way she'd flinch whenever I touched her. I'd hired a private investigator not because I wanted to catch her cheating, but because I needed to know if I was losing my mind. The photos he'd delivered yesterday still burned behind my eyelids. Sophia wrapped around Marcus Blackwood, my biggest business rival outside the Four Seasons downtown. Marcus fucking Blackwood. The smug bastard who'd been trying to buy out my company for 2 years. But a fake pregnancy test? That was a new level of manipulation I hadn't seen coming. I sank onto our king-sized bed, the one where she'd whispered promises of forever, just 3 months ago when I'd slipped the 5-carat ring onto her finger. The engagement ring that had cost me more than most people's houses, now sitting on her nightstand like a piece of costume jewelry. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Sophia wasn't just cheating on me with Marcus. She was planning to trap me with a fake pregnancy while probably carrying his child, securing her access to my fortune before disappearing into his arms. The prenup I'd insisted on would mean nothing if she was carrying what I believed to be my heir. My phone buzzed against the marble nightstand, a text from Sophia. "Running late tonight, baby. Emergency at the gallery. Love you." The gallery. Right. The same gallery where Marcus had been photographed buying a painting last week, according to my investigator's report. I stood up slowly, my reflection catching in the floor-to-ceiling mirror across from our bed. At 34, I still looked like the scrappy kid who'd coded his first app in his dorm room, just with better clothes and fewer illusions about trust. My black hair was disheveled from running my hands through it, and my usually sharp brown eyes held a hollow quality I'd never seen before. But as I stared at myself, something shifted. The hollowness crystallized into something harder, colder, something that reminded me of the ruthlessness that had built my empire in the first place. Sophia wanted to play games? I'd show her what happened when you tried to con a man who'd spent years navigating Silicon Valley's shark-infested waters. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Elena Vasquez, the most feared corporate attorney on the West Coast and my longtime friend from Stanford. "David?" Elena's voice was crisp, professional. "What's wrong? You sound like someone died?" "Not yet," I said, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "But I need your help with something. How quickly can you draft a few documents for me?" "Depends on what kind of documents. Are we talking contracts, NDAs, or something more creative?" Elena knew me well enough to read between the lines. We'd been through corporate wars together, hostile takeovers, and patent disputes that had made national headlines. She'd seen me at my most ruthless. "Creative," I confirmed. "I need you to draft a fake merger agreement between my company and Blackwood Industries. Make it look like Marcus is selling his entire operation to me for pennies on the dollar due to some fabricated financial crisis." There was a pause. "David, what the hell is going on?" "I'll explain later. Just make sure it looks legitimate enough to fool someone who doesn't understand corporate law. Can you have it ready by tomorrow?" Of course, but... And, Elena, I need you to prepare real divorce papers, too. Make them as brutal as legally possible within the constraints of the prenup. Another pause, longer this time. Should I ask what Sophia did? She made the mistake of underestimating me. After hanging up with Elena, I called my assistant Marcus, not to be confused with the snake trying to steal my fiancé, and cleared my schedule for the next 3 days. Then I opened my laptop and began crafting the performance of my life. The plan was simple in its elegance. If Sophia wanted to manipulate me with a fake pregnancy, I'd give her exactly what she was looking for: a devoted, naive fiancé who would do anything to protect his unborn child. I'd play the part so perfectly that she'd never see the trap closing until it was too late. By the time she came home that night, I was waiting in our living room with a bottle of her favorite wine and takeout from the Italian place where we'd had our first date. The apartment was dimly lit, candles flickering on every surface, creating the kind of romantic atmosphere she'd always claimed to love. "David!" Sophia's voice carried a note of surprise as she stepped through the door. She looked stunning as always, her long auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, her emerald dress hugging curves that had once made me forget every other woman existed. Now all I could see was the deception behind her green eyes. "Hey, beautiful." I stood up and crossed to her, pulling her into what I hoped looked like a loving embrace. Her perfume, Chanel No. 5, the one I'd bought her for her birthday, made my stomach turn. "I wanted to surprise you." "This is..." She seemed genuinely taken aback. "This is wonderful! What's the occasion?" I guided her to the couch, my hand resting on the small of her back, in a gesture that had once been natural and now felt like playing a role. Do I need an occasion to celebrate the woman I love? She smiled, but I caught the flicker of guilt in her eyes before she turned away to pour herself wine. "You're being awfully romantic tonight." "I've been thinking a lot lately," I said, settling beside her and watching her face carefully. "About us. About our future." "Oh?" The wine glass paused halfway to her lips. "I know I've been focused on work lately. Too focused. But I want you to know that you're the most important thing in my life." The lies tasted like ash, but I delivered them with the sincerity of a man truly in love. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Something flickered across her features. Was it remorse? Fear? Or just annoyance that I was making her deception more complicated? "David, I've been thinking about starting a family," I continued, cutting her off gently. "I know we've talked about waiting, but maybe it's time to take that leap." Her face went pale. "A family? Now?" "Why not? We're financially stable, we love each other, and I'm finally at a point where I can step back from the day-to-day operations of the company." I reached over and took her hand, noting how cold her fingers felt. "I want to build something real with you, Sophia, something that lasts." She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at our intertwined hands. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. Here it comes, I thought. The performance I'd been waiting for. "What is it, sweetheart?" I think I might be pregnant." The words hung in the air between us. I let my face cycle through confusion, shock, and finally pure joy, each expression carefully calibrated to match what she'd expect from a man hearing this news for the first time. "You think? You mean you haven't taken a test?" "I have. 2 of them. They were both positive." The tears spilled over now, tracking down her cheeks in perfectly timed streams. "I wanted to be sure before I told you. I know this isn't planned, and I know we're not married yet." I silenced her with a kiss, pouring every ounce of fake emotion I could muster into the gesture. When I pulled back, I was smiling like a man whose dreams had just come true. "This is incredible," I breathed. "We're going to have a baby." "You're not angry?" "Angry? Sophia, this is the best news you could have given me." I pulled her closer, breathing in that treacherous perfume. "We need to move up the wedding. I want us to be married before the baby comes." "David, we don't have to rush." "Yes, we do." I cupped her face in my hands, looking directly into those lying green eyes. "I want my child to have married parents. I want to give you everything, Sophia. Everything you've ever dreamed of." She broke down then, sobbing against my chest in what I assumed was guilt masquerading as relief. I held her and stroked her hair and whispered sweet lies about our future, while my mind calculated exactly how I was going to destroy her. The next morning, I was up before dawn, working in my home office while Sophia slept. The fake merger documents from Elena had arrived in my encrypted email, and they were perfect. Detailed enough to be convincing, but with enough legal loopholes to ensure they'd never hold up in court. My phone rang at precisely 7 a.m. Marcus Blackwood's name flashed on the screen. "Chen," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "David, we need to talk." Marcus's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "There are rumors flying about your company acquiring mine. What the hell is going on?" I allowed myself a small smile. Elena worked fast. "I'm not sure what rumors you're referring to, Marcus. Perhaps you should clarify." "Don't play games with me. I have sources saying you're planning a hostile takeover, that you found some kind of financial irregularities in my books." "That's a very serious accusation, Marcus. Financial irregularities could destroy a company's reputation overnight." I paused, letting the threat sink in. "Of course, if your books are clean, you have nothing to worry about." "You son of a bitch, this is about Sophia, isn't it?" The mask slipped for just a moment. "I have no idea what you mean." "She told me you'd been acting suspicious lately." "Christ, David, if this is some kind of jealousy thing—" "Marcus," I interrupted, my voice deadly calm. "I suggest you focus on your own house before making accusations about mine. And Marcus, stay away from my fiancé." I hung up before he could respond, then immediately called Elena. "The documents worked perfectly," I told her. "Marcus is in full panic mode." "Good. The real divorce papers are ready too, along with the evidence portfolio. David, I have to ask, are you sure about this approach? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." There was no going back the moment she decided to betray me. That evening, I took Sophia to dinner at Le Bernardin, the same restaurant where I'd proposed. She wore the blue dress I'd bought her in Paris, and the engagement ring caught the candlelight as she gestured while talking about baby names and nursery themes. "I was thinking about something classic," she was saying, one hand resting on her still flat stomach in a gesture that might have seemed natural if I didn't know the truth. "Maybe Michael for a boy, or Emma for a girl." "Those are beautiful names," I said, cutting into my Dover soul with surgical precision. "Have you thought about when you want to schedule your first doctor's appointment?" The question was casual, but I watched her face carefully as I asked it. "Oh, I was thinking next week. I want to make sure everything is okay before we start telling people." "Of course, I'll come with you." "You don't have to—" "Sophia." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "This is our child. I want to be involved in everything." She smiled, but I caught the flicker of panic in her eyes. "Of course. I'd love that." "Actually, I have a surprise for you." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo Elena had sent me. A picture of a massive penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. "I put an offer in on this place today. I want us to have more space for the baby." Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the photos. "David, this is incredible, but it must cost 12 million. I said casually. But money doesn't matter. Nothing matters except you and our baby. The guilt was eating her alive. I could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly as she handed back my phone, in the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. You don't have to do all this, she whispered. Yes, I do. I leaned forward, dropping my voice to an intimate whisper. Sophia, you're carrying my child, my heir. Do you have any idea what that means to me? She looked like she was going to be sick. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the role of devoted father-to-be with Oscar-worthy dedication. I had prenatal vitamins delivered. I cleared out my home gym to make space for a nursery. I even called my mother in Taiwan to share the good news, enduring her tearful joy and promises to fly out immediately. Meanwhile, Marcus was slowly imploding. The fake merger documents had leaked just enough to cause real panic among his investors. His stock price had dropped 15% in 3 days, and according to my sources, he was fielding calls from creditors who'd suddenly gotten nervous about his company's stability. But the real masterstroke came on Thursday evening. I was in my study, ostensibly working on quarterly reports, when Sophia appeared in the doorway wearing one of my old T-shirts and looking uncharacteristically nervous. David, can we talk? I looked up from my laptop, projecting nothing but loving concern. Of course. Is everything okay? Is it the baby? No, it's about Marcus Blackwood. My blood turned to ice, but I kept my expression neutral. What about him? She came into the room and perched on the edge of the leather chair across from my desk, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. He called me today. He's in some kind of trouble. Financial trouble. He seemed to think you might know something about it. Why would Marcus Blackwood call you? The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. I watched her face cycle through a dozen different emotions before settling on something that looked like resignation. Because we used to date, a long time ago before I met you. The lie came so smoothly, so naturally, that I almost believed she actually thought I was stupid enough to buy it. You dated Marcus Blackwood? I made my voice sound surprised, but not suspicious. You never mentioned that. It was brief. It didn't mean anything. But apparently he's facing some kind of hostile takeover, and he's grasping at straws. He wanted me to ask you if there was anything you could do to help him. I pretended to consider this, steepling my fingers in front of my face. That's odd. Marcus and I aren't exactly friends. We're competitors. Why would he think I'd help him? I don't know. He seemed desperate. She looked down at her hands. David, there's something else. He said some things about us, about our relationship. I think he might be trying to cause problems between us. What kind of things? He implied that I was only with you for your money, that I was using you. Her voice broke on the last words, and fresh tears started flowing. It hurt so much to hear him say those things, especially now when we're going to have a baby together. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen the photos, if I didn't know about the fake pregnancy test, I might have actually believed her. Come here, I said softly. She came around the desk and let me pull her onto my lap, burying her face against my neck as she cried. I held her and stroked her hair and felt absolutely nothing except a cold satisfaction that my plan was working perfectly. Sophia, look at me. She pulled back, her face streaked with tears. Marcus Blackwood is a desperate man watching his empire crumble. Desperate people say desperate things. But I know who you are. I know what we have together. I brushed a tear from her cheek with my thumb. Nothing he says can change that. I love you so much, she whispered. I love you and I love our baby. and I would never, ever do anything to hurt you." "I know," I lied. "I love you too." That night, while Sophia slept beside me, I sent Elena a single text message. "It's time." The next morning was a Friday, and I had orchestrated every detail with the precision of a military operation. I woke up early and made Sophia breakfast in bed, French toast with fresh berries, just the way she liked it. "What's all this for?" she asked, accepting the tray with a sleepy smile. "It's going to be a long day at the office, and I wanted to start it right." I sat on the edge of the bed and watched her take a bite. "Actually, I have something for you." I pulled out a small jewelry box. Not a ring this time, but a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a baby's footprint. "David, it's beautiful." She let me fasten it around her neck, her fingers tracing the tiny pendant. "I'll never take it off." "Promise." "Promise." By the time I left for the office, she was back asleep, the necklace catching the morning sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows. She looked peaceful, almost innocent. It was almost enough to make me feel sorry for what was about to happen. Almost. At exactly 11 a.m., Elena walked into my office carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of a shark who'd smelled blood in the water. "Everything's in place," she said, setting the briefcase on my desk. "The real financial documents on Blackwood Industries, the photographic evidence, the timeline of Sophia's deception, and the divorce papers." "And the press release?" "Ready to go out at noon. By tonight, everyone in the city will know that Marcus Blackwood's company is bankrupt and that his affair with your fiancée was the catalyst for his downfall." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. "What about the meeting with Sophia?" "I've asked her to come to your office at 1 p.m. I told her you had a surprise for her regarding the wedding plans." "Perfect." Elena studied my face for a moment. "David, are you absolutely certain about this? Once we do this, her reputation will be destroyed along with his. She'll never recover from this kind of public humiliation. She made her choice when she decided to cheat on me and fake a pregnancy for financial gain," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I'm just making sure she lives with the consequences." At 12:30, I got the confirmation text from my PI. Marcus Blackwood had just been arrested on charges of securities fraud, charges that Elena had carefully orchestrated using very real evidence of financial irregularities that had been hidden in his books for months. At 12:45, my assistant buzzed to let me know that several major news outlets were running the story about Blackwood Industries' collapse. At 12:58, Sophia walked into my office looking radiant in a yellow sundress that made her skin glow. She was carrying a small gift bag and practically bouncing with excitement. "I brought you something," she said, crossing to my desk and kissing me softly. "A little present for the father of my baby." She handed me the bag, and I opened it to find a coffee mug that read, "World's Best Dad," in cheerful blue letters. "Do you like it?" she asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. "It's perfect," I said, setting it carefully on my desk. "Sophia, sit down. I have something to show you too." She settled into the chair across from my desk, smoothing her dress over her knees. "What kind of surprise? You're being very mysterious today." Instead of answering, I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward her. The web page displayed the headline, "Tech mogul Marcus Blackwood arrested in securities fraud scandal. Company declares bankruptcy." I watched her face go white as she read the article. "David, what is this?" "Keep reading," I said gently. "It gets more interesting." Her hands were shaking as she scrolled down to the section detailing Blackwood's inappropriate relationship with the fiancé of a business rival, and how The affair may have been part of a larger scheme to manipulate corporate acquisitions. This can't be real. Oh, it's very real. Marcus was arrested this morning. His assets are being frozen pending investigation. His company is worthless. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. Tell me, Sophia, how does it feel to be carrying the child of a man who's going to prison? The color drained completely from her face. David, I don't know what you think you know, but I know about the fake pregnancy test. The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually recoiled in her chair, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I know about the affair. I have photos, hotel receipts, phone records. I know you've been planning to trap me with a fake pregnancy while carrying his child. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Would you like to see the evidence? David, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You made your choice. You chose to betray me, to lie to me, to try to steal from me. I stood up and walked around the desk, stopping directly in front of her chair. Did you really think I was that stupid? Did you think I'd built $1 billion company by being naive about human nature? She was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivers. I love you. I do love you. This wasn't supposed to happen. Marcus, he promised me. He promised you what? That he'd leave his wife? That he'd take care of you? I laughed, a cold sound that made her flinch. Marcus is going to prison, Sophia. His wife has already filed for divorce. His assets are frozen. He can't take care of himself, let alone you. I'm not pregnant, she whispered. You're right. I'm not pregnant. But I can explain. I don't want your explanations. I want you out of my life. I returned to my desk and picked up another folder, this one thick with legal documents. These are divorce papers. Elena has made them as brutal as legally possible within the constraints of our prenup. You'll get exactly what you deserve. Nothing. Her face crumpled. We're not married. You can't divorce me. You're right. But I can sue you for fraud, for emotional distress, for a conspiracy to commit theft. I can make sure every newspaper in the country knows exactly what kind of person you are. I dropped the folder in front of her. Or you can sign these papers agreeing to walk away quietly, and I'll let you disappear without completely destroying your reputation. She stared at the papers through her tears. What papers? A statement confessing to the fake pregnancy and the affair. A non-disclosure agreement preventing you from ever speaking about our relationship publicly. And a forfeiture of any claim to my assets, including the engagement ring. David, please! I made a mistake. I was scared and confused, and Marcus, he manipulated me. Stop. I held up a hand. Don't insult my intelligence by playing the victim now. You're a grown woman who made calculated choices. Own them. The office fell silent, except for the sound of her crying. Outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, the city carried on, oblivious to the small drama playing out in my corner office. Finally, she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What if I don't sign? Then I'll destroy you so completely that you'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Your friends, your family, your co-workers at the gallery. Everyone will know that Sophia Martinez is a lying, cheating fraud who tried to steal millions of dollars with a fake pregnancy. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact second she realized I meant every word. I need a pen, she said quietly. I handed her my Mont Blanc, the same pen I'd used to sign the contract that had made me my first million. She signed each document carefully, her tears dropping onto the expensive paper and smudging the ink slightly. When she was finished, she set the pen down and removed the engagement ring from her finger. The 5-carat diamond caught the afternoon light as she placed it on my desk next to the coffee mug. "I did love you," she said softly. "At the beginning, anyway. That wasn't fake." "Maybe not," I agreed. "But it wasn't enough, was it?" She stood up slowly, like an old woman despite being only 28. "What happens now?" "Now you leave. You pack your things from the apartment. My assistant will supervise to make sure you only take what belongs to you. And then you disappear from my life forever." She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "And Marcus?" "Marcus will spend the next 5 to 10 years in federal prison. His wife is taking half of whatever assets don't get seized by the government. He'll be lucky if he can afford a studio apartment when he gets out. You destroyed him." "No, he destroyed himself when he decided to commit securities fraud. I just made sure he got caught." I sat back down and opened my laptop, dismissing her with my attention. "Goodbye, Sophia." She stood there for another moment, maybe hoping I'd change my mind, maybe just trying to process the complete upheaval of her life. But finally she turned and walked toward the door. "David?" I looked up from my screen. "I'm sorry for all of it. I really am sorry." "So am I," I said. And for just a moment, I meant it. After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, staring at the engagement ring and the coffee mug on my desk. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from Elena, from my assistant, from various business associates who'd heard about Marcus's downfall. The tech blogs were already speculating about which of his clients I'd steal, which of his employees I'd poach. But I felt strangely empty. 6 months later, I was closing the biggest deal of my career. A government contract worth $3 billion that had once been Marcus's to lose. My company's stock had hit an all-time high, and Forbes had just named me to their 40 under 40 inches list for the 3rd consecutive year. I celebrated alone in my new penthouse. Not the one I'd shown Sophia, but a different one. Modern and minimalist and completely devoid of memories. The view was spectacular, stretching across the entire city. But I found myself staring at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows instead. I looked successful, powerful, untouchable. I also looked exactly like what I'd become, a man who'd chosen revenge over forgiveness, calculation over compassion. The victory felt hollow in ways I hadn't expected. Elena had kept me updated on the aftermath, though I'd never asked. Marcus had been sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. His wife had taken their children and moved across the country, changing their last name to distance themselves from the scandal. Sophia had disappeared completely. No social media presence, no forwarding address, no trace of her existence in the city where we'd once planned to build a life together. Sometimes I wondered if she'd found peace somewhere, or if the weight of her choices followed her wherever she went. As for me, I threw myself into work with renewed intensity, building my empire higher and wider than ever before. I dated occasionally. Beautiful, successful women who understood that I wasn't interested in anything serious. I told myself I was protecting them from the kind of betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. But late at night, in the silence of my perfect penthouse, I sometimes found myself thinking about the morning I'd made Sophia breakfast in bed, how peaceful she'd looked wearing the necklace I'd given her, how for just a moment I'd almost believed we could have been happy. The truth was, we'd all lost something in that final confrontation. Marcus had lost his freedom and his family. Sophia had lost her future and her reputation. And I had lost something harder to define. Maybe my capacity for trust, maybe my willingness to be vulnerable, maybe just the naive belief that love could conquer all. But I'd won. I'd gotten my revenge, protected my fortune, and emerged stronger than ever. Most days that felt like enough. On the really honest days, I wasn't so sure. The last time I saw Sophia was completely by accident, Almost 2 years after that day in my office, I was having dinner at a small restaurant in Portland during a business trip when I spotted her through the window, walking down the street with a man I didn't recognize. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, her style more casual, her face free of the designer makeup she'd once worn like armor. But she was smiling, and the smile looked real in a way I'd never seen when she was with me. The man beside her was clearly ordinary. Average height, average looks, probably an average income. But the way he looked at her, the way she leaned into him as they walked, there was something genuine there that we'd never had. I watched them disappear around the corner and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not because I wanted her back, but because it meant she'd found a way to rebuild after the destruction I'd helped cause. Maybe there was hope for redemption after all. I finished my dinner alone and flew back to New York the next morning, carrying that image with me like a small weight in my chest. When I got home to my empty penthouse, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I threw away the coffee mug. It was a small gesture, almost meaningless, but it felt like finally closing a door that had been standing open too long, letting in cold air and old ghosts. The next week, I called Elena and asked her to draft papers for a charitable foundation focused on supporting women who'd been victims of financial abuse. I endowed it with $50 million and named it the Second Chances Foundation. I never told anyone why I'd chosen that name, but every time I signed the checks, I thought about Sophia walking down that Portland street with her ordinary man and her genuine smile. Everyone deserved a second chance. Even the people who'd wronged us, maybe especially them. And maybe, if I was very lucky, someday I'd deserve one too. The foundation's first grant went to a shelter for women escaping domestic violence. The second went to a legal aid society helping women navigate divorce proceedings. The third went to a job training program for women re-entering the workforce after major life changes. Each check I signed felt like a small step toward something that might, eventually, resemble peace. I was 36 now, and successful beyond my wildest teenage dreams. My company employed thousands of people. My innovations had changed entire industries. My name appeared in business magazines and conference programs around the world. But the morning I woke up and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd genuinely laughed, I knew something had to change. I started therapy. Not because I felt guilty about destroying Marcus and Sophia, but because I wanted to understand why their betrayal had driven me to such cold calculation. What I learned wasn't comfortable. You turned your pain into power, Dr. Richardson explained during one of our sessions. It's a common response to betrayal, but power without purpose becomes its own kind of prison. I have purpose, I argued. I built a company that creates jobs, that innovates, that contributes to society. That's accomplishment, David. Purpose is different. Purpose is about who you want to be, not just what you want to achieve. It took months of uncomfortable conversations for me to understand what she meant. I'd spent so long focused on winning that I'd forgotten why winning mattered in the first place. On a cold Tuesday morning in December, almost 3 years after that final confrontation with Sophia, I did something that would have seemed impossible to the man I'd been during those dark months of planning my revenge. I wrote Marcus Blackwood a letter. Not an apology. I wasn't sorry for exposing his crimes, but an acknowledgement that I'd taken a kind of satisfaction in his downfall that went beyond simple justice, that in my quest to protect myself from betrayal, I'd become someone I wasn't sure I liked. I never sent the letter, but writing it helped me understand something important. The man who'd orchestrated Marcus's destruction with surgical precision wasn't the same man who'd built a tech empire through innovation and determination. Somewhere along the way, I'd let anger transform me into someone I no longer recognized. The real work of rebuilding wasn't about creating new companies or amassing more wealth. It was about finding my way back to the person I'd been before betrayal had taught me that Love was just another vulnerability to be protected against. It was harder than any business deal I'd ever negotiated, and infinitely more important. 6 months later, I met Rebecca at a charity fundraiser for the Second Chances Foundation. She was a pediatric surgeon who'd spent her morning saving a child's life and her evening raising money for women in crisis. When she smiled at me across the crowded ballroom, it was with eyes that held no agenda beyond basic human kindness. "You're David Chen," she said when I introduced myself. "I've read about your foundation. Thank you for doing something that matters." "Thank you for saving lives," I replied. We talked for 3 hours that night, standing in a corner of the ballroom while the city glittered beyond the windows. She told me about growing up in a small town in Ohio, about choosing medicine because she wanted to fix things that were broken. I told her about building my first app in college, about the satisfaction of creating something from nothing. I didn't tell her about Sophia or Marcus, or the cold satisfaction I'd once felt watching my enemies fall, but somehow, talking to Rebecca, I began to remember who I'd been before. Betrayal had hardened my heart into something resembling polished stone. "What's the hardest part of your job?" I asked as the evening wound down. "Knowing that I can't save everyone," she said without hesitation, "but trying anyway, because the ones you do save make all the failures worth it." I thought about that answer for weeks afterward, about the difference between trying to save people and trying to destroy them, about whether redemption was possible for someone who'd chosen revenge over mercy. 3 months later, Rebecca and I were having dinner at a quiet restaurant in Brooklyn when she asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Tell me about her," she said, setting down her wine glass and fixing me with those impossibly direct brown eyes. "Her? The woman who broke your heart so badly that you're still afraid to let anyone close?" I could have deflected, could have changed the subject or made a joke, or simply refused to answer. But something about Rebecca's gentle persistence made me want to tell the truth. So I did. All of it. The affair, the fake pregnancy, the calculated destruction I'd orchestrated. I told her about the satisfaction I'd felt watching Marcus's empire crumble, about the cold precision with which I'd signed Sophia's life away. I told her about the hollow victory and the years of isolation that had followed. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, turning her wine glass slowly between her fingers. "Do you regret it?" she finally asked. "Which part?" "The revenge. The way you destroyed them." I thought about it carefully before answering. I regret who I became in the process. I regret the satisfaction I took in their suffering, but I don't regret protecting myself, and I don't regret exposing the truth about who they really were. She nodded slowly. Pain changes us. Sometimes it makes us harder, sometimes it makes us wiser. The question is whether we let it make us better or just make us bitter. "And which did it make me?" "I think you're still deciding." That night, lying awake in my penthouse while Rebecca slept beside me, I realized she was right. I was still deciding who I wanted to be in the aftermath of betrayal. The man who'd destroyed his enemies with surgical precision, or the man who'd learned to build something meaningful from the ashes of his trust. A year later, I proposed to Rebecca on the roof of the children's hospital where she worked. Not with a 5-carat diamond that cost more than most people's houses, but with my grandmother's simple gold band that my mother had worn for 43 years. "Are you sure?" she asked, tears streaming down her face as I slipped the ring onto her finger. "Are you sure you're ready for this? For trust and vulnerability and all the messy complications of loving someone?" "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life protecting myself from something that might actually be beautiful." We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific. My mother flew in from Taiwan and cried through the entire service. Elena served as my best woman, having long since become the closest thing I had to family. Rebecca's parents welcomed me with the kind of unconditional acceptance I'd forgotten was possible. As we exchanged vows, I found myself thinking about second chances and the difference between justice and revenge, about the choice between building walls and building bridges, about the courage it takes to love someone when you know exactly how much it can hurt when love goes wrong. But mostly I thought about Rebecca's hands in mine, steady and warm and real, and the way she looked at me like I was someone worth saving. 2 years into our marriage, Rebecca came home from the hospital with news that made my heart stop and start again in the span of a single breath. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice soft with wonder and fear and joy all mixed together. For just a moment, I was back in that other life, hearing those same words from lips that had been trained to lie. But then Rebecca smiled. That radiant, uncomplicated smile that had first made me believe in the possibility of trust again. And the past fell away like an old skin I'd finally outgrown. "Are you happy?" she asked, reading the complex emotions playing across my face. "I'm terrified and ecstatic and completely overwhelmed," I said, pulling her into my arms. "So yes, I'm happy. I'm so fucking happy I can barely breathe." Our daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in April, arriving 3 weeks early with a full head of dark hair and her mother's eyes. We named her Hope because she represented everything I'd thought I'd lost and found again. Holding her for the first time, her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb with surprising strength, I understood something that had eluded me for years. Love wasn't about control or protection or careful calculation. It was about showing up again and again, even when it scared you. It was about choosing trust, despite knowing that trust could be broken. It was about building something beautiful, knowing it might not last, and doing it anyway because the building itself was what made life worth living. When Hope was 6 months old, I received an unexpected letter. No return address, postmarked from Seattle. Inside was a simple card with a photo of a small garden, roses climbing a white trellis. On the back, in handwriting I recognized but hadn't seen in years, were 4 words: "Thank you for Hope." It wasn't signed, but I knew who it was from. Somehow Sophia had learned about my daughter's birth. Maybe through mutual acquaintances, maybe through the business press that had covered my marriage to Rebecca. The message was characteristically ambiguous, but I chose to interpret it as a kind of peace offering, an acknowledgement that even the worst chapters of our lives could lead to something beautiful if we were willing to learn from them. I showed the card to Rebecca that evening as we sat on our apartment balcony, watching Hope sleep in her bassinet while the city lights sparkled beyond the railing. "What will you do with it?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, tucking the card into my wallet. "But I'll keep it, as a reminder." "Of what?" "That everyone deserves a second chance, even the people who hurt us, even ourselves." Rebecca reached over and took my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." And for the first time since that terrible morning when I'd found the empty pregnancy test box, I meant it without reservation or fear or the careful calculation of a man protecting himself from pain. I meant it the way Hope would learn to love, completely, trustingly, with the kind of faith that believes in happy endings even after you've learned how stories can go wrong. The next morning, I woke before dawn and watched my family sleep in the soft light filtering through our bedroom windows. Rebecca curled on her side with one hand resting protectively over Hope's bassinet, our daughter's chest rising and falling with the perfect rhythm of new life. This was what victory really looked like, I realized. Not the destruction of your enemies or the accumulation of wealth or power, but this quiet moment of contentment, This sense of having built something real and lasting and good. I thought about the man I'd been 3 years ago, brilliant and successful and completely hollow inside. That man had won every battle and lost himself in the process. He'd protected his assets and forgotten what made those assets worth protecting in the first place. But that man had also made choices that led me here, to this moment, to this family. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing your past mistakes, but about learning to build something beautiful on their foundation, as hope stirred in her sleep, making the soft sounds that never failed to make my heart skip. I made a promise to myself and to them. I would be the father she deserved, present and patient, and unafraid of the vulnerabilities that came with loving someone more than your own life. I would be the husband Rebecca deserved, honest and faithful and brave enough to trust in happy endings. And maybe, if I was very lucky, I would finally become the man I'd always wanted to be before betrayal taught me that power was safer than love. The sun was rising over the city now, painting our bedroom in shades of gold and possibility. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably waking up in a federal prison cell, counting down the days until his release. Somewhere else, Sophia was starting another day in whatever new life she'd built from the ashes of our shared destruction. But here, in this moment, in this room filled with the people who'd taught me that second chances were not just possible but necessary, I was exactly where I belonged. The story of David Chen and his revenge was over. The story of David Chen and his redemption was just beginning. And this time I was determined to get the ending right.